Hello, my superstars, and welcome to the online learning unit that I've designed for us, Twisted Tales. Over the next several weeks, we're going to be reading many short stories and poems, and also watching some short clips and films that all fall under the horror genre. And in this presentation, you are going to be learning about some elements of horror that we are going to be looking for and discussing as we read and move through the online unit. Okay, so first it's important to note that the elements and characteristics of the genre, the horror genre, are countless. There are so many. However, I've narrowed it down to four important elements that we are going to be continually looking for and talking about and discussing. And we're going to be analyzing our texts to find these elements and discuss them together. The four that I have chosen for us are conflict, building of suspense, foreshadowing, and plot twists, which are also sometimes called story reveal. Okay, we're going to start with conflict. In literature, a conflict is a literary device characterized by a struggle between two opposing forces. So essentially, what we're going to be looking for is some kind of tension or some kind of opposing force that our main characters are experiencing in the literature that we read and also in the films that we're watching. And there's 5 different types of conflict that we are going to be on the lookout for. First is man versus man. This is when our main character is opposed by another human character. Man versus self is when our main character's biggest opposition or biggest tension is his own self. So think about the saying, we are our harshest critics, or we are our own worst enemies. Also, and something that we're going to be running into often as we're moving through this unit, are characters that seem to be hallucinating or that are paranoid when they're making up things to be scared of. That is another example of the conflict type that fits under man versus self. Man versus society is a third type of conflict. Man versus nature is another. And then lastly, number 5 is man versus supernatural. We are going to be coming across man versus supernatural a lot over the next several weeks. So these are the 5 different types of conflict, and it's going to be our job as readers to determine what types of opposition and what type of tension our main characters are experiencing. What types of conflict are we seeing in the texts and in the films that we are approaching? Okay, next up is suspense building. And this looks different in movies compared to literature. In movies, I think it's a little bit easier to build suspense because you have a visual component. So, for example, you can adjust the lighting and create shadows to build suspense. Camera angles are really, really powerful tools in building suspense. These two on the top here, these are called low angle shots. And what this does is the camera is looking up at the villain. This often gives them this sense of power or intimidation. This bottom one here is called a tilted angle, and this creates a disoriented sort of feel, or it can also be, it can create like an unsettling effect. Sound and silence and volume are also techniques that can be adjusted in order to build suspense. For example, So that slow kind of building of sound and really intense sound can build suspense. So those are just some examples of how suspense can be built and maintained throughout a movie. In literature, it looks very different. In literature, to build suspense, all of the visuals have to be planted into the reader's mind. You don't have a visual aspect, so you have to create that using words. So this is where descriptive language comes in, and we've already talked at length about descriptive language, so you should all know what that is. But essentially, you want to use your descriptive language to create vivid images for your reader, images of dark and mysterious settings and characters. And then also, there are certain stylistic choices that writers can use to influence things like pace and mood. So below, I have excerpts from the same story. It's called Pickman's Model. And I'm going to read them really quickly for you so that you can, to demonstrate how the style of writing can influence pace and mood. So sometimes when you use really long sentences, it can convey chaos and panic. Its position was a kind of crouch, and as one looked, one felt that at any moment it might drop its present prey and seek a juicier morsel. Damn it all, the fiendish subject had a dog face, with pointed ears, bloodshot eyes, flat nose, and drooling lips. It had scaly claws and half-hooved feet, and his technique, Eliot, the cursed, the impious, the unnatural technique. As I am a living being, I never elsewhere saw the actual breath of life so fused into a canvas. The monster was there. It glared and gnawed and gnawed and glared. And I knew that only a suspension of nature's laws could ever let a man paint a thing like that without a model, without some glimpse of the netherworld. So again, really long sentence. I mean, there are a couple of periods in there, but really, I mean, when you're using several commas to break up a really long sentence, or when you're using these dashes here to convey like a brief pause, as opposed to stopping the sentence and starting again, it creates this sense of chaos and panic. Now, on the other end of that spectrum, using short sentences or excessive commas that encourage lots of breaks and pauses, that can convey sort of mystery and anticipation. And this is also from Pickman's Model. He drew a revolver, motioned me to silence, stepped out into the main cellar, and closed the door behind him. So those are some examples of how stylistic writing and choices that an author makes can influence things like pace and mood. And ultimately, pace and mood can be adjusted to build suspense. Okay, third is foreshadowing. This is the third element of horror that we're going to be looking for as we're reading. And to help me explain this, we're going to watch this quick clip.
A young woman is preparing for her day. She brushes her hair, sprays on a little perfume, opens her drawer to get her scarf, closes her drawer, and leaves her home. Wait a second. Did you notice something unexpected? Why is a gun in her drawer? Why is it presented in this way when it is not used at this moment? You are given a clue about what will happen later. This is called foreshadowing. Foreshadowing happens when clues in a story hint at future events. What about this situation? Who is the man in the photograph? What might the photograph be foreshadowing?
Okay. So we talked a lot about foreshadowing when we were reading our Percy Jackson books, we talked about how different patterns can be seen as a way of an author giving you clues as to what's to come. In Percy Jackson, we talked about how the constant mention of weird patterns in weather and also all the very strange situations that occurred in water were foreshadowing what we later figured out was that Percy was actually Poseidon's son. Another good example, and one a little bit closer and more relevant to this unit, Twisted Tales, is in Stranger Things. So I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but if you've watched Stranger Things, you know that the game that they play, Dungeons and Dragons, is a really important kind of clue of what's later to come. Also, in a later season, this photo here is the boys playing, and in one of the games that they're playing, a character mentions, "I'll use my torch to set fire to the chambers, sacrificing ourselves." And again, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who's never seen it, but this bottom photo here is an example of how this was foreshadowing what later was to come. So foreshadowing is really important, especially I think in the horror genre, and something we're going to be looking a lot at in the coming weeks. And that leads me to our last element, plot twists or story reveals. In literature, film, television, and even video games, a plot twist is an unsuspected occurrence or turn of events in the story that completely changes the direction or outcome of the plot from the direction it was likely to go. Plot twists are designed to disrupt things in a story that the audience thinks they already know or have figured out. The author achieves this twisting of the plot by providing a huge shock or surprise, one that is either completely unexpected or was perhaps foreshadowed through earlier details or events. So, these are the 4 that we're going to be looking at. These 4 important elements of the horror genre: conflict, building suspense, foreshadowing, and plot twists or story reveals. If you guys have any questions, I hope that you know you can always email me. Also, I'm available on Zoom for office hours to answer any questions or help you work through any of the assignments. I hope that you are excited about this unit, as excited as I am, and I hope to see you all soon.